There is a moment in every toxic interaction where everything quietly changes, but most people never recognize it. It is not when they raise their voice or when they try to insult you, and it is not even when they attempt to manipulate you. The real shift happens when you stop reacting completely. Toxic people depend on your responses more than you realize because your emotions are the only source of control they have. They expect you to get angry, they wait for you to defend yourself, and they rely on your frustration to keep the situation alive. Every word you speak gives them material to twist, and every reaction you show gives them more power over you. But the moment you choose silence, something unexpected begins to happen. At first, they assume you are weak or that you have nothing to say, and they believe they are still in control of the situation. However, as your silence continues, the dynamic starts to shift in a way they cannot understand. Your silence removes their access to your emotions and cuts off the energy they depend on to manipulate you. It creates a space where their words lose impact and their strategies stop working. This is the moment where they begin to feel unstable because their control is slipping away. And the most powerful part is that you did not argue, you did not fight, and you did not try to prove anything. You simply stopped playing their game, and that is what changes everything. The system toxic people rely on toxic people do not rely on truth or logic to control situations, but instead they rely on emotional reactions because that is where their real power comes from. Their behavior follows a predictable pattern where they trigger you intentionally, wait for your reaction, and then use that reaction to gain control over the interaction. They do not need to be right to feel powerful because control for them is not about facts. It is about emotional dominance. The moment you respond with anger, frustration, or even explanation, you unknowingly step into their system where everything begins to work in their favor. Once you react, they gain the ability to twist your words, shift the focus of the conversation, and bring up unrelated past issues just to keep you emotionally engaged. This is why arguments with toxic people rarely lead to resolution, because their goal is not to solve anything, but to keep the conflict going. You may feel like you are defending yourself or trying to make them understand your perspective, but in reality, you are feeding the very cycle that keeps you trapped. Every response you give strengthens their position and gives them more material to manipulate. This pattern continues because most people believe that staying silent means losing, but with toxic individuals, the opposite is true. The more you engage, the more control they gain, and the more you lose your emotional balance. However, when you stop reacting, the entire system begins to break down because the one thing they depend on is no longer available. Silence interrupts their pattern and removes the foundation of their control. Without your reaction, they cannot continue the cycle in the same way. At first, they may not understand what is happening because they are used to predictable responses. But your silence introduces uncertainty into the situation, and that uncertainty is the beginning of their instability. Why silence makes them lose control? When you choose silence, you take away the one thing toxic people depend on the most, which is your emotional reaction. Without that reaction, their usual strategies begin to fail because they no longer have anything to work with. Toxic individuals are used to controlling conversations by provoking responses, but when those responses disappear, they are left without direction. They cannot twist your silence, they cannot argue against it, and they cannot argue against it, and they cannot use it to continue the conflict. This creates confusion because their expectations are no longer being met. They are used to a certain pattern where their words lead to your reaction, but now that pattern is broken. As a result, they begin to feel a loss of control that they are not prepared for. At first, they may increase their efforts by becoming louder, more aggressive, or more manipulative in an attempt to pull you back into the interaction. They may repeat the same points, bring up new accusations, or try to provoke you in different ways. However, your silence creates a barrier that they cannot cross because it gives them nothing to engage with. Without your participation, their words lose their power and their influence begins to fade. This loss of control leads to instability, because their sense of power is directly tied to your reactions. When those reactions are no longer available, they begin to feel uncertain and frustrated. Over time, their behavior may become more erratic because they are trying to regain control in any way possible. But the more they try and fail, the more unstable they become. And all of this happens simply because you chose not to react. Silence exposes their true nature. Silence does something that arguments never can because it removes distraction and reveals reality. When you stop reacting, toxic people can no longer hide behind your emotions, and their behavior becomes more visible. Normally, they rely on your responses to shift the focus away from themselves. But without your engagement, everything they say and do stands on its own. This makes their behavior easier to see and understand. Their patterns become obvious, their manipulation becomes clearer, and their intentions become harder to hide. What once felt confusing now starts to make sense because there is no longer any emotional noise clouding your perception. They may try different tactics such as guilt, blame, or playing the victim, but without your reaction, these tactics lose their effectiveness. Each failed attempt reveals more about who they are and how they operate. This exposure creates discomfort for them because they are no longer able to control the narrative. Instead of controlling the situation, they are now being revealed by it. Over time, this makes their behavior look repetitive and even predictable. You begin to see that their actions are not personal, but patterned. And once you recognize the pattern, it becomes easier to detach emotionally. This is the power of silence, because it not only protects you, but also exposes them without any effort. How silence protects your energy. Silence is not just about affecting them, but it is also about protecting yourself. Every time you engage with toxic behavior, you lose mental and emotional energy that cannot be easily recovered. Arguments drain you, overthinking exhausts you, and constant conflict keeps you stuck in a cycle of stress. But when you choose silence, you step out of that cycle and regain control over your energy. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself or defend every accusation. You stop trying to be understood by someone who is not willing to understand you. This shift allows you to focus on your own peace instead of their chaos. Your mind becomes calmer, your emotions become more stable, and your overall well-being improves. Silence also creates a boundary that does not require words. It sends a clear message that you are not available for manipulation or unnecessary conflict. Over time, this boundary becomes stronger because it is reinforced by your consistency. The more you maintain your silence, the less influence toxic people have over you. You begin to realize that not every situation deserves your attention and not every person deserves your response. This awareness changes how you interact with others and helps you protect your mental space more effectively. And in that protection, you find clarity and control. The shift that happens within you as you continue choosing silence. Something important begins to change within you. You stop feeling the need to prove yourself, defend your actions, or seek validation from others. You become more confident in your own understanding and less dependent on external approval. This creates a sense of independence that makes you emotionally stronger. You also become more observant because you are no longer reacting impulsively. Instead of getting caught in the moment, you start seeing situations more clearly. This clarity allows you to recognize patterns, understand intentions, and make better decisions about where to invest your energy. You begin to feel more in control of your life because your reactions are no longer controlled of your life. Because your reactions are no longer controlled by others. This inner shift is powerful because it changes not only how you handle toxic people, but also how you see yourself. You realize that your peace is more important than winning arguments, and your energy is more valuable than proving a point. This mindset creates freedom because you are no longer tied to the need to respond. And in that freedom, you become stronger than ever before. Silence is not weakness, and it is not avoidance, but it is a conscious decision to protect your energy and take control of your reactions. Toxic people depend on your emotions to maintain their influence. But the moment you stop reacting, their power begins to disappear. At first, they may try harder to provoke you because they are not used to losing control, but without your response, their efforts become weaker over time. Their instability is not caused by your silence alone, but by the loss of the control they once had over you. At the same time, your silence gives you something even more valuable, which is clarity, peace, and emotional independence. You stop being pulled into unnecessary conflict and start focusing on what truly matters in your life. You no longer feel the need to explain yourself to those who are not willing to understand, and you stop wasting energy on situations that do not deserve your attention. In the end, you do not need to fight toxic people or prove them wrong to win. You simply need to stop giving them what they want. And when you do that, they lose control while you gain it.